This week on the big show, episode 403, by the way, Dave Chappelle dropped 846 yesterday. We definitely need to talk about that. Also this week, HBO Max decided that they would take Gone with the Wind off their platform. Is this a bridge too far? And finally, Spike Lee dropped his 25th joint, The Five Bloods. We're going to have a discussion and a review. We'll have all that and more on the latest episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. No music's playing, but Charles is there. Charles Kirkland, what's up, boy? How you doing?
I'm here. I'm feeling good. This is a momentous occasion because we have actually something really interesting to speak about today.
We do. And so welcome to today's show. So I'm just going to jump right into it, man. Normally we would put my man Wilson Morales, and I think as we keep moving forward, I'm going to keep interjecting some pieces that represent what we used to do. But now I'm just going to go into it, man. I just finished watching Dave Chappelle's latest special. I don't call it a comedy special because there wasn't really a lot funny about it, but it was very poignant. 846, man. Absolutely amazing. Just like Beyonce, just in The Thief of the Night, just dropped it, and people were like, Charles, you sent me a text to check it out while I was watching it the first time. What did you think about 846?
I thought it was poignant. I thought it was pointed. I thought it was timely. And like you said, it wasn't very funny. There was a little humor in it, but it was very, very significant, I think, towards what is happening in our world today. And I mean, we're talking about pandemics and we're talking about that kind of stuff, but this whole George Floyd issue is just driving the whole car right now. And so that I mean, when you talked about HBO and you know, there's ramifications all of it, but man, I was impressed. It was one of the few times that I got my family together and made everybody watch 846. It is impressive work. And just to me, I think it kind of solidifies the fact that when we've talked about Dave Chappelle in the past, and I continue to say that I think that he's getting close to being the best that ever did it.
Well, it's interesting you would say that because for years I've always held Richard Pryor and George Carlin up as my two favorites because not only were they funny, and they were great storytellers, but they also dealt really well with social and political kind of topics. Dave Chappelle, we always throw around, or the phrase, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And I think it's all subjective because we're talking about art. But personally, I think that the ability for Dave Chappelle, and when I watched it the fourth time, I saw how there were times when he would introduce a topic and he would just pause on the stool for like 10 to 15 seconds. And you could see his mind processing and working. I just think he's an absolute a Jedi master when it comes to comedy and observations. He's an amazing storyteller. I would not even disrespect Dave by trying to talk about his special. You can just check it out on Netflix's YouTube platform. Netflix is a joke radio, and that's where it's playing. So it's a Netflix production on their YouTube platform.
Right. I
would highly suggest you check it out. And I would also add, as we got about a couple more minutes left in this segment, that I shared with Charles and I shared with people who are close to me that, the George Floyd video and some of the other videos that are released that show this police brutality, I refuse to watch them because as a film critic, I have this innate ability to whatever my eye captures, it stays in my head. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I've never seen the George Floyd video. And don't want to see the George Floyd video. And as I was explaining, I was on a conference call with my film festival team earlier this morning and my Black Reel Awards team. And we were talking about this. And I said, I'm a guy who grew up within a decade of Emmett Till. So my whole life, as it relates to all these inequities that have happened over 6 decades, I've heard and seen them all. And I've been in that place as a man of color, as you are, Charles, and any other black man or black person or person of color. And when I say person of color, I'm talking about you could be, you know, Hispanic, Latinx, whatever. You're a person of color. If you're of African descent, you know what I'm talking about when you're talking about these inequities here in the occupied state of America. And for all you people who are about to send me hate mail, you black, you know what I'm talking about. It is occupied. Or you feel like you're occupying America. But having said that, I think, as I wrote on my on my Facebook post about Dave's YouTube Netflix special, that Dave articulates that great quote from James Baldwin: to be a Negro, I'm paraphrasing, to be a Negro and to be aware is to always be in a constant state of rage. And I wrote, Dave articulates that rage on 846. So I thought it was genius. I think he's absolutely been my favorite comedian. He's I like how intelligent Dave is. I like that he's also, his perspectives and insights always give me something. That's why I watch his work over and over, because I can always learn something in every viewing of Dave Chappelle. So 846, like I said, man, absolutely brilliant. It is on Netflix's YouTube channel. Netflix is a Joke Radio, and you can check it out. I think it's 27 minutes and 21 seconds. He recorded it 7 days ago. It was June the 6th, so it was a week ago, last Saturday night in Ohio, and they dropped it on Friday. So just, the age of technology and connectivity, there used to be this whole thing, Charles, that, we got to make a project, and then we got to finish it, and then we got to promote it, and we got to go on tour and then roll it out. Not in 2020, you don't. Not in 2020, man. So having said that, Charles, let's talk about the next thing on our agenda today. HBO Max. Earlier, I guess, and we talk about what's going on now, as everybody is now telling us that Black Lives Matter. You and I, both being black men over the age of 50, we've known that Black Lives Matter all our lives, as well as all the other black people who are watching this. But I'm glad y'all finally got around to listening to us tell you about the occupied state of policing that has gone on my entire life, and almost all of yours as well, Charles. I say almost because I can't speak for you. But having said that, there are some things that I see that I call window dressing and distractions, like the fact that Starbucks will now allow people to wear, or their employees to wear, Black Lives Matter gear. Yeah, it's cute. I mean, it doesn't, it's a step. So I feel in a way that HBO Max was trying to make a statement with Gone with the Wind. The problem with this statement to me, and I thought about it immediately. I was like, oh, that's the only racist movie from Hollywood's golden era? That's the one? I said, off the top of my head, now you notice, and Charles has been in the studio, so I do this, right? Off the top of my head, I don't have to write stuff down to do this job. So off the top of my head, let's see, Charles, movies that I just think could be problematic for people. And I'll start back in the 30s. Let's say a movie like Judge Priest, Step and Fetch It, or almost any Step and Fetch It movie, right? That's problematic. Let's go with 1936 Showboat, where the great Paul Robeson is singing "Darkies on the River," and when he's singing "Old Man, Old Man River." Let's go with Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1960. Yeah, whatever the year was. Let's go with that one when Mickey Rooney plays an Asian Mr. Yakamoto in a very stereotypical way. Or you can go with an earlier Mickey Rooney movie, and you name the one, where he puts on blackface and thought it was amazingly funny. I mean, so I could go back to the Home of the Brave from 1949, where the famous scene where the white guy is trying to inspire and motivate a black guy, and he says, "Get up, you in! Walk over here, you in!" And I was like, Wow. Wow. So to be black and to watch classic movies or to watch movies in general, because when I see a scene in a film like Pulp Fiction, where that famous scene where the black dude is in the back seat and Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta are there and he accidentally shoots him and he brings him over to Quentin Tarantino's house and he says it's dead in storage. And I was like, wow. So my point is, or my last one, Charles, and we talked about this on the phone the other day. One of my favorite movies ever is The Godfather. And there's a great scene in The Godfather when the five families are sitting around the table. Sonny's been killed, another guy's son has been killed, and they're trying to unify. And they're talking about heroin. And I never forget the famous scene. I quoted it to you the other day, word for word. The guy goes, I pay my people extra not to deal in narcotics. Leave it among the dark people. They're animals anyway. Let them lose their souls. And I was like, damn, word? This is right here, right in front of me. I'm sitting right here. So my point is that when you start talking about, making a statement with movies and now looking at movies, there is any number of movies. I would almost estimate 30 to 40% of movies from 1930 to 1950. If you watch them long enough, I guarantee you can find something that would be objectionable where you would go, man, we just need to get this movie out of here. Charles?
The other day I was watching Trading Places, and we all know that Don Amici and
Ralph Bellamy
and Don Amici were racist from the jump. But there was a lot of other things. You even have a scene in there where Dan Aykroyd is in blackface and portraying. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there in Hollywood that's just not acceptable. And where do we start drawing the line? I mean, how do we start drawing the line, or should we start drawing the line? At some point in time, I think it's up to, maybe it's a personal preference. I'm not going to watch this movie, or in the instance of HBO, they say we're not going to show this movie. But again, where do you draw the line? Is there going to be a global line that's going to be drawn, or is it? I think it should be a personal preference.
Well, I think my opinion on it is it's art, right? So let's say hypothetically, you have pieces like Mona Lisa, or you have what is the name of the Michelangelo, the something of David that's on the ceiling, the famous
the fingers.
Right. What is it called? Anybody in the background back there? What is it?
Painting
Michelangelo's. Is it Michelangelo's David?
David is a sculpture, but I know what
you're talking about. But I apologize if I'm messing this up. But my point is that when you start talking about art, right, and you think about how art is created, so there are things that were probably made or created in the 18th century, the 19th century, that may have been vogue during their time, but over time became passé. People moved on, their tastes changed and things of this nature. And the thing about movies is, since we're only talking a century of moving images, or a little over a century, I should say, of moving images, I still think we haven't really come to grips, I would say, with how art in the United States, how should we judge art? Because, I've traveled abroad. I know you have as well. And I remember one day spending 7 hours in a museum over in Madrid and looking at art that was 5 times older than our country, art from like the 10th century, the 11th century. So, and some of it kind of moved me. A lot of it bored me, but that's not my eye. But my eye is about the moving image, which is movies. So, for an example, there was an audience in 1914 of some people whose descendants are now our CSAers, the folks who are Trump supporters, who think a movie like D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation is an amazing film. I happen to think it is an abomination. one of the worst experiences that anybody of color could ever experience for 3 hours of watching a film like that. But that was art in 1914. The president of the United States at that time was Woodrow Wilson, who invited D.W. Griffin to the White House and described the film as writing history with lightning. So my point is that when we start thinking about, a decision to remove a film like Gone with the Wind, was Gone with the Wind racist? Absolutely. Was it the only film in 1939 or in that time period that was racist? Absolutely not. So my point is that I think it sets a bad kind of a bad precedent. Thank you. On if this is going to be the move, because what I would think, instead of removing these movies, I think you should set them aside and use them to teach and to show how we've evolved as a culture, as a society, and instead of trying to banish these films, because as soon as they took Gone with the Wind off, Amazon had it as the #1 trending movie that people were just buying up copies of Gone with the Wind, which is really funny and ironic because do you realize, Charles, there's a theater in Atlanta that has been showing Gone with the Wind every day since 1939? Every day.
Yes.
7 days a week. Excuse me?
And the great thing I think about it is it encapsulated what was happening at that time. I think it was an accurate portrait, although it was racist, it was an accurate portrait of the times that it was depicting. So in some ways, it's even historical. And there's a lot of people out there who haven't seen Gone with the Wind, and I've talked with my children, and I think none of the three have seen the movie. But there's a lot, and it was one of my mother's favorites. But there's a lot of things that happen in that movie that have some basis in reality of that time. So sometimes when you're looking at a film, you have to put it, and I say this a lot when we're talking about the Bible, you got to put it in its context.
Yeah, in its own context.
You got to do with a film. Sometimes you got to look at a film in its context and understand it for what it is. Sometimes it's racist, and oftentimes because of where we came from, that was a reflection of the time. So it helps us to understand who we are and where we came from.
Right. No, I got you, man. So I think the story still needs to be written as it relates to what we're going to do with these movies. And as I said, we will know more. It's interesting that no other studio or other streaming service has stepped up and went, yeah, let me go through my catalog and see what movies we can get rid of too. So HBO Max, I see what you were doing there. Yeah. Like I said at the opening, I think it might be a bridge too far, man. And we want to start going down the realm of trying to find films that have been objectionable over time because, there's just far too many of them, right? So having said that, I go to our final segment today, and we're talking about stuff we object to. Let's talk about Spike Lee's 25th movie, which premiered yesterday on Netflix. And of course, we're talking about The Five Bloods. And this film, which I'm going to do a review, I want to talk about it a little first. Directed by Spike Lee, produced by, his team that he's worked with for years, John Killick and several others, co-written by a group of 4 people. The original story, which Lee and my friend Kevin Wilmot, who both won Oscars with Black Klansman last year, they took Danny Bilson and Paul DeMayo's story, and then they swapped it and changed it out, put a whole lot of Marvin Gaye in it, put a whole lot of Spike Lee in it, and the rest, they say, is history. This story of a group of men who are going back to Vietnam to find the remains of their friend who was their squad leader, played by Chadwick Boseman, and also to go back and find some gold that they had confiscated and left behind years earlier. I really dug this film a lot, man. I thought, and I'll just do this real quick for you, Charles, and then we'll bring you in afterwards. But I thought that even without knowing a lot about the film, it was interesting that there were several things in the film that were very familiar to me in watching it, right? So if you watch enough Spike Lee's work, you see sort of themes that run through his work. And, you know, the brotherhood and the banter reminded me a lot of Get on the Bus, when they get back together and you see groups of black men kind of chopping it up and doing their thing. I thought the dialogue there was really interesting for men who hadn't seen each other for long periods of time, and how, despite the fact that they were familiar with each other from the past, how they fell back into their patterns, you know, and how each character kind of had its own focus and was kind of written out. You know, Delroy Lindo, who's done several Spike Lee films, including famously Malcolm X, where he was West Indian Archie, and in Crooklyn, when he played like the father Spike that represented Spike Lee's father in this kind of loose biopic. I thought Delroy Lindo was fantastic. He also brings in one of the best character actors in the business, in Clark Peters, who he worked with in Red Hook Summer, and also for people who remember him in Homicide. Clark Peters is an amazing. It was Homicide that Clark Peters was in. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, because I was getting scared. I didn't want to say The Wire. I know he wasn't in The Wire. But Clark Peters is a fantastic actor. Also bringing in Jonathan Majors, who was in The Last Black Man in San Francisco. I thought that he was good. So basically what I'm saying is this film to me is what I call the really good Spike Lee. Where you have and I'm being honest. I mean, I love Spike Lee. Anybody who knows me has heard me say on this show and has heard me say privately that I think he's the greatest black filmmaker that Hollywood has ever produced. And I think he's one of the top working directors in the business today. 35 years. I'm proud to say I've nearly seen every film that Spike Lee has ever made. And when I say nearly, there was some films, or, you know, a couple of films we won't name. But I do remember seeing Spike's debut student thesis, Joe's Bed-Stuy Barbershop, We Cut Heads, which I thought kind of foreshadowed the immense talent that this young man, and I'm calling him young and he's older than me, but the immense talent that Lee has. And he puts it all on display in this film. So you've got that happening. If anybody's ever seen Humphrey Bogart and the Treasures of Sierra Madre, you clearly see the fingerprints of that film. About what gold does and the greed that comes in. There's also a lot of Marvin Gaye, which is really interesting because the 49th anniversary of What's Going On was literally like a couple of weeks ago, and I've been listening to that album on and off, and Spike puts at least 4 songs from that album in the film, including an a cappella version, which is haunting the way he uses it in the film. It is really well done. So there are so many really good things about this film. The only thing about this film that bothered me was the fact that in these flashback scenes that they didn't cast younger actors. And I realized from watching The Irishman that it's a very expensive proposition to try to de-age actors. So it took me a minute to adjust because I've watched the film now 3 times. So, you know, I just kind of go with it. And I think Spike in an interview talked about, you know, I think the audience will just fall into it and they'll go with it. But I think this is a great follow-up to BlacKkKlansman. And the fact that I did an interview earlier this week with Kevin Wilmot, the co-writer of the film, and I talked about they also get an additional benefit in this film, Charles, from it being perfectly, the timing of its release, it's perfect for where society is right now. There's this hunger as we're in this cultural shift, and all this society is changing. And this film literally fits just like this with society right now. It is the perfect release point, the perfect film. I think the performances are great. I think Lee's direction and vision and his team, everything about this film works well. I would give this film a B+. The only reason why I didn't get that A was for that reason I told you about. And I think there's some scenes in it that are a little, you know, as he brings it together at the end, which I really thought I loved his ending. Spike's ending sometimes sort of kind of leave me cold. You know, I think about, wake up being screamed at me in school days. I think about the ending of Malcolm X, which, I am Malcolm X. Yeah. I watched all of Spike's films. He's not great at endings. What was the other one? Mo Better Blues. Yeah, Spike's not great at endings, but middle of films, Spike's great. Spike's great. So I gave it a B plus, man. I give this a B plus.
I kind of disagree on the ending of this movie. I thought it was actually pretty cohesive, brought things to more than had been before. I think this one came to a peaceful conclusion.
Before, like when, Charles? Go ahead, say it. I'm gonna get you to say it now. Say it, Charles. What was these before movies you talking about? Look.
I'm not gonna talk about Spike because I want to stay on Spike's good side.
Hey man, I love Spike Lee, and as I said on this show plenty of times, I've been in Spike's company 3 times. He was nice to me once. He was prickly to me. That's the word I use. He was prickly twice. But I love Spike Lee. I mean, the fact what I feel about Spike personally. And Spike's work, I think he is not just an important artist. He may be one of the most important artists of our generation because remember, She's Gotta Have It in 1986 kickstarted an entire movement which gave us John Singleton, Mario Van Peebles, Keenan Ivory Wayans, even into the day with the Gina Prince Bythewoods, Ava DuVernays, Ryan Coogler, Barry Jenkins, all these guys were inspired by the work of Spike Lee. They really were. No, I mean, they will tell you to a person. And then also think about Halle Berry, Martin Lawrence, Samuel L. Jackson, and a lot of other actors who may not have gotten their start. Queen Latifah, who some got their start with them, some who had started off and then got into Spike's films, and their careers really took off. So,
yeah.
I love Spike, man.
For me, I thought it was an A- performance, and I think Spike did something in this movie that Quentin Tarantino wasn't even able really to do, and that is to make a long story but make it engaging throughout the whole process. And there were maybe one time when I thought this movie is long, but everything worked together and everything was told that story well. And so I think that when we think about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which Tarantino did last year, there were moments in time when you're like, where are we going with this? Why is it taking all this time to tell the story? But I never really felt that as I watched Spike's story, and I was comfortable with him portraying this tale the way he did, jumping back in time and going forth and putting all these clips in. His style is truly his own. And of course, you're looking for the one shot and you get the shot, but it's a Spike Lee joint for real. And I was impressed. And again, like you said, we got 2 pieces of social commentary at the same time with Dave Chappelle's work, and then this perfect commentary for where we are in this world. I don't know if he planned it this way or just I think the release date was planned long before.
Absolutely.
But man, the way this is just perfect for the time is just incredible, and I say it's one of his best works. Kevin Wilmot and joining Spike Lee has been the best thing that's happened to Spike Lee in a while.
And the other interesting thing about this film, man, is that it's trending right now. I think it was number 3 on Netflix. The film's father-son message is going to resonate because Father's Day is next week, and I would highly recommend, if you don't get a chance to watch it this week and you want to watch it with your dad or think about memories of your dad, it's also a good film for that. So that's why I said the timing of how they drop this, as a rule, it generally doesn't work this way, man. You could end up with this weekend, or let's say you could end up with the week of 9/11, which happened to Glitter, and some other films that have happened in the past that have just gotten sabotaged.
Would it have been a better movie if it had come out at a better time?
Well, let's just put it like this. Glitter was already a bad movie coming out, but the fact that 9/11, it just amplified the fact that like nobody's gonna go to this movie. Now nobody's really going to see it now. So yeah, I mean, or you can think about what was the Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez movie? The Geely?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I heard a rumor that somebody told me, or was it you, about art? No, somebody was telling me this morning about Artemis Fowl and how Artemis Fowl is now like looked at as one of the worst movies. Now I'm gonna tell you, I've seen some bad movies in my day. If you've seen Pluto Nash, oh yeah, bro. Oh yeah, Pluto Nash was a hot mess. Eddie Murphy to this day laughs about that. Like, hey man, what you want from me, man? Or Best Defense. Remember that one?
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, that's a movie, man, where in my mind when I say it, I can see the flies flying around the movie like, woo, this movie.
Well, my children aren't happy about the Artemis Fowl information, but you know that's the way it goes. Not everything. There's a reason it's on a streaming service. But I will say this: last week we talked about the dearth of things during this time.
Right.
These two things dropping this week have given me optimism for maybe we can redeem the rest, some of the rest of this year. We're only halfway in. There may still be some good things to come.
Well, you know, you're right. But we got to go, though, man. So, you know, as I tell you guys every week, man, and closing the show, see something good at the movies. This week, you got The Five Bloods. If you haven't had an opportunity yet, please check that out. It's on Netflix. And as I said, it's the #3 trending film in the world right now. And last but not least, if you have not seen 846, Dave Chappelle's latest special, you notice I never used the word comedy special. His latest special, it's on Netflix as a joke platform on YouTube. Check that out. Until next week, this is Charles Kirkland and I. And of course, we are out. We will see you guys soon. You guys take care.